My name is Rick Rule for Rule Investment Media, sponsor of the Natural Resources Investment Symposium in Boca Raton, Florida, July 23rd through 28th. I'm delighted to have a returning sponsor with us, a guy who's been with us for a very long time despite his young age, Mr. Tony Reda, CEO of Tectonic Metals. Tony, thank you, first of all, for coming on for this interview, and thank you, too, for your ongoing sponsorship and support of the Rule Investment Symposiums.
You're so welcome. It's an honor to actually do this event again. I was a big fan the first time. I have a motto in life: do everything twice. The first time to do it, and the second time to do it better. So, with that being said, let's get this started for sure.
Well, that's an interesting lead-in. Let's
Oh,
talk about the first success that you
yeah.
had up in the Yukon when I got to know you. Let's talk about your prior successes in exploration and development and sale in northern Canada.
Mhm,
Take us through that
mhm.
success.
Yeah, for sure. Kaminak Gold Corporation was my first formal entry into the corporate world and also into mineral exploration. I was an investor prior to that, but Kaminak was a grassroots prospect generator, which I know you're a fan of that model. And off we went from a $3 million market capitalization, made a drill discovery in 2010. So perhaps some people might say deviated from the model. I would say executed on the model. Decided to ring fence this one project called the Coffee Gold Project ourselves 100%. Raised 165 million, delineated 5 million ounces, produced a very robust feasibility study. We were dipping our toe on the permitting front, and three major mining companies actually put in a bid to acquire us. The successful acquirer was Goldcorp for 520 million. So that was the first success. You might say I'm batting 100%. I don't know if past success is necessarily an indicator of future success, but it definitely is beneficial to know what a discovery looks like and to go through that process. And here we are at Tectonic with the endeavor of doing that all over again.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all, let's talk
Yeah.
about the sort of genesis of Tectonic, how it sort of grew out of Kaminak, and then tell us
Mhm.
about Tectonic itself, what it is that you're about, where you're doing it, that type of thing, an overview of the company.
Sure, for sure. So the Coffee Gold Project, Kamnak's project that was acquired, was in the Yukon Territory of Canada, which shares a political border with Alaska. Some of the key executives behind Kamnak, myself, Ira Thomas, so on and so forth, we decided to hop over that political border, which is not a geological border, and sort of test the waters in Alaska. The mineral endowment in Alaska is spectacular, especially for a first world jurisdiction. We were also intrigued with the opportunity to work directly with the native corporations. So the genesis of Tectonic was, yes, do Kaminak all over again, but perhaps doing it slightly different, slightly better, with actually having allies or partners by our side. And when I say that, I mean specifically the local communities, the natives or the native corporations. So we work directly on native owned land, and we decided to actually shake up the junior mining space a bit and do things differently on the corporate front. So we actually are sponsored or funded by natives. So we have indigenous as or native people on the shareholder registry. They were our second largest shareholder up until a resource fund called Crescat bumped them out of number one into number two, and they became now our largest shareholder. So those are some of the things that we do slightly different, things that we're proud of: forming production agreements on early stage assets, working on native owned land, and having natives as our shareholders.
Let's talk about some of those physical assets.
Yes.
Uh, Describe what it is that you've been working on and what it is that will bring shareholder value this year.
For sure. So our core asset, which I was just starting to talk about last year at the Rule Symposium, has really come to the forefront. This project has the ability to transform our company. Well, why is that? Why am I so excited? Well, initially when we look for early stage or projects that have visibility to become a mine, I typically use the analogy: how do you find Michael Jordan at the age of 10? How do you find Rick Rule at the age of 10? If you're looking at it from the sort of investment perspective. So trying to find a project in the infancies that ticks the boxes of what potentially could become a mine. Well, this project has a rich placer endowment that made it the fourth richest placer mining jurisdiction in all of Alaska, 1.4 million ounces of recorded placer production, essentially coming out of the main target called Chicken Mountain. There's a massive golden soil anomaly. And so my belief is big deposits leave big footprints. Mother Nature can hide a 500,000 ounce gold deposit, but how does it hide a 5 and 10 million ounces? So to that point, we have the placer endowment. We have this massive 4-kilometer golden soil anomaly. We have 55 historical drill holes where every hole hit gold. So we're batting 100%. We also have the depth potential. Only the average vertical drill depth from the historical drilling is only 100 meters, and 25 out of the 55 holes ended in mineralization. So that's our starting point. And so this is some of the reasons why we see scale. One of the things that we did slightly different than most junior mining companies, as I mentioned earlier, we're all about de-risking our projects as quickly as possible. We did metallurgy before we put a drill hole into this. So this project, with the metallurgy being de-risked on native land, production agreements, the 55 drill holes, is a pretty good foundation to now launch into this year's fun and exciting component, which is going to be our maiden drill program on this asset.
And describe that, the extent of it, and what unanswered question in particular do you hope to answer? You've got 55 drill holes in it now.
Yeah.
Why will these drill holes be different? What will we learn that will change the market's understanding of the deposit and increase the share price, of course, of Tectonic?
For sure. As I mentioned, our worst case scenario is the 55 drill holes. That is only probably about 20% of the gold and soil anomaly that's tested. As I mentioned earlier, 4 kilometers. So what's going to be transformative, we want to show scale, not just for our shareholders or the investment community, but also for the management and the team. We don't want to necessarily be involved in anything that's lower than, we picked an arbitrary number of 5 million ounces. So we want to show scale. We want to show economics. How are we going to do that? Well, at first blush, it appears to be an open pit heap leach opportunity. We've done metallurgy. We're going to continue on that front with column testing. And then we also, by showing scale laterally, we also want to show scale at depth. And, as I mentioned again earlier, only the average vertical drill depth is 100 meters. So we want to target at depth as well. And if you're familiar with our project, it is a bulk tonnage intrusion related gold system. And where you sit in that system is indicative of what the potential could be. And so one of the better parts of these systems is the cupola, and we want to drill test that, which hasn't been done to date on our property.
So if I could paraphrase, you are at once trying to understand the lateral extent of the project, while at the same time, too, probing the depths. Does that mean that you believe that in a gold system this size that there could be high-grade feeders? Is that the purpose of the deeper exploration, or am I anticipating next year's work?
Yeah, that's essentially it. And I didn't want to get too technical, but think of this intrusion model, this deposit model, as a layered cake, and each layer has a geochemical signature. So gold has a bunch of best friends, and where you're situated with those friends implies the layer that you're at. And the sweet spot for this system is the cupola, and that typically is a little bit lower at depth. And we do have indicators that suggest we're just on the horizon of that system.
Got it. And are there ancillary assets in Tectonic that you want to talk about, or do you want to limit the conversation so far to this focus asset?
We do have our first acquisition that we're also big fans of, but the bulk of this year's drilling time and energy is going to be focused on our flat gold project. So we can leave it at that for this interview.
Got it. And what about the means? Do you have sufficient cash to de-risk the project sufficiently to increase the market's knowledge of it?
Yeah, we do have capital in the treasury currently, and we're live on a financing as we speak. So the closing of the financing will be the means that we speak of in regards to the maiden drill program this year.
Got it. And finally, one of the really unique things that I want to bring to the fore was the beginning of your conversation, where you talk about the importance of community partners, your work with the Alaska Native corporations. I've benefited myself a substantial amount by being able to work alongside Native corporations in Alaska. If you could talk a bit about who your hosts are and describe the depth of your relationship more fully.
Yeah, for sure. So on that point, we ventured into Alaska and we went native knocking. So there's several native corporations in Alaska. I will say they're for profit. The one that we partnered up with, and we formed 5 mineral lease agreements, or 5 production agreements, if you will, is called Doi Unlimited. You can Google them. They're also the largest private landowner in Alaska, and they as a for-profit entity, natural resources is only one aspect of the for-profit pie. There's a whole slew of others, and I guess our work, whether it's in regards to our technical work, but also our community and early engagement work, the concept of this production agreement. We also went to the local communities and villages prior to acquiring an asset as part of our due diligence. They were really inspired by that, and so they decided, yes, we're going to benefit as being a stakeholder on these projects, but we also want to benefit as being a shareholder. And hence they've made not one but 3 strategic investments into our company. And again, we're very proud and honored to have Indigenous shareholders on the registry.
Obviously, it makes sense to have a very sophisticated regulator who's also a shareholder. There's nobody who
Yes.
can regulate you better than somebody who knows you from the inside out.
Yes.
Tony, I want to close off the interview by congratulating you on the past success at Kaminak, wishing you well, of course, on Tectonic, but particularly thanking you for this educational video and for your appearance at and support of the Rural Investment Symposium in Boca Raton.
Well, thank you. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here again and to have that endorsement from you as well, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks again.